Which story is it?
About entering cessation and experiencing Sankara. So like the subtle formations that generate consciousness.
Which story is it?
About entering cessation and experiencing. Oh, whoops. Okay, so I think it's done now. Okay. All right, good. So
You
it's
mean you shared your experience about what you went through in the retreat? Is that the story you mean?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
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 I shared it on ATR and a few
Yeah.
people found me through that. Yeah. Yeah, I think you messaged me afterwards. But yeah, the reason I'm doing it now is or I'm retelling this particular story is because I want to chop it up into little bits and um, put it on my YouTube channel. So
Mhm.
okay, so we'll begin. I think it should only be showing me, but if you definitely don't want to be on the YouTube video, you can just mute yourself. Yeah. Yeah, it should just be me. I'm spotlighted. Okay. So in uh, Theravadan Buddhist meditation, there's they're known as stations of cessation, or like the mind is gradually becoming calmer and calmer and calmer, and these are called jhanas. So in the modern discussion on this matter, there's some debate about what jhana actually is now, whether it's in accord with the original suttas, the Pali discourses, or in accord with the commentaries. So a great deal of the Thai tradition and the Southeast Asian tradition, Theravada Buddhism, practices in accordance with the commentaries. It's only more recently, like in the last post-colonial era, that there's been this return to really um, following the Pali Suttas and approaching the jhanas in that way. So in last June, I went on a retreat to do a specific form of Theravadan meditation called tranquil wisdom insight meditation. And it was um, taught by a monk named Bhante Vimalaramsi and his student Delson Armstrong. At the time, actually, Bhante V was still alive, but he passed about a week after the retreat. So, like usual in most Theravadan meditation systems, there's debate over authenticity and whether a person or whether that teacher and tradition is really doing it in accord with the original suttas, how much of it is in accord with the suttas versus how much of it is, their own personal innovation on the practice. And as far as TWIM is concerned, I'm not going to get into that whole discussion. It's not particularly relevant to me. I'm also not a certified TWIM instructor by any means, so I just want to be clear about that. Being in the commentary camp on this matter, I always had the opinion that these light jhanas were like watered down, lowering the standards stuff that I'm very critical of when it comes to um, Theravada Buddhism in the West. So that was my initial take on anything that was not the commentary jhanas. So the jhanas in accordance with the commentaries means that when your mind becomes very, very still, there's a special meditation image that appears that is called a nimitta. So nimitta means sign, and it's referring to these types of mental images that arise in deep stillness. And when those mental images arise, they're reflections of the purified mind. So what you might experience is a moon disk, for example, or a it's like a soft piece of wool or stars. But these mental signs or these mental images, they're different from what normally arise in the mind stream, in the sense that when you place your attention on them, they draw you very deep into meditation. I mean, like so deep that you lose contact with the physical body, the stream of mentation or the stream of thought, internal dialogue, all of that stops. So these internal nimitta, they're able to draw the meditator very deeply into absorption and into the jhanas in accordance with the commentarial tradition. So today, those are referred to as like the deep jhanas, right? So in light jhana, there's no nimitta that is necessary. And I'll define jhana very, very briefly as well. It just means that the mind has entered this wholesome state of purity and mindfulness, and it's accompanied with specific factors depending on the particular jhana. So in the first jhana, you'll have applied attention, sustained attention, happiness, bliss, and equanimity or one pointedness. And as you progress from the first jhana to the fourth, these particular factors fall off. So by the time you get to the fourth jhana, there's only equanimity, only one pointedness. So the real difference is whether a nimitta is being used or not, and the depth of the continuity of one's mindfulness. So in the commentarial jhanas, even in the first jhana, your mind does not wander at all. I mean, like for 3 hours, if you're in this, your mind will not wander. Zero. It's perfection of mindfulness. So that's the standard that I've always held. And it's not that your mindfulness is being held in a particular way. That's not, it's not like this volitional thing. What happens is the nimitta becomes so refined, your mind is drawn into this meditative state. And once it's in that state, the mind wandering is no longer occurring, and the jhana factors reach their fruition, meaning they're extremely mature. So the bliss is very strong, the happiness is very strong, the equanimity is very strong. There's no capacity to exercise shifting of attention or generate an intention once you're in a deep jhana. It's like once you pass the threshold, your consciousness faculties of attention and intention, they will not return until you've emerged from that state. So in the light jhanas that are taught in TWIM, this approach is completely different. Basically, if you're just feeling happy, feeling some equanimity, and you're feeling the joy from loving kindness, that is considered the first jhana in TWIM. So how this approach works, generally how it's taught is they practice metta. So they visualize a spiritual friend, they send the intention, the sending of the intention generates this open-heartedness and really, profound joy from loving kindness. And you really ride that all the way into the formless realms. So the formless states are infinite space, realm of infinite space, realm of infinite consciousness, realm of infinite nothingness, and neither perception nor non-perception. So you can see the first four jhanas and then the upper jhanas or the formless jhanas. These are all, you can see them as layers of the onion of mind. So as the mind becomes progressively still, progressively refined, progressively quiet, it passes through these stages. So once you're in equanimity in the fourth jhana, this boundlessness starts to happen. You start to feel yourself expanding into space. And by the virtue of that equanimity and that release from form, really, you begin to experience deep spaciousness. And we call that realm of infinite space. In the commentarial standard, it would mean that your mind is completely absorbed in infinite space. No thinking, no body, nothing. But in the light jhanas, as long as there's a sense of expanding into infinite space, that's sufficient. So you proceed. Now you're in the upper jhanas, and you just start letting go. Really, you stop trying. You stop doing anything. You're not generating metta anymore. You're not generating equanimity. You're not radiating anything. You're really just resting in the purity of mind. And what happens is you progress from infinite space to infinite consciousnesses, infinite nothingness. Infinite nothingness means that now the mind is taking nothingness as its object. It's more refined than spaciousness. So even the sense of becoming like a cosmic mind, that has now fallen away, and the mind is really just attending to this wall of nothingness, this empty nature. When it has done this sufficiently, um, the mind then becomes so quiet that it begins to enter this strange edge of reality, edge of mind state that we call neither perception nor non-perception. So this is the eighth jhana. It's here that you really begin to perceive all these geometric forms, um, something that Delson calls proto-thought. So these are like these fractal formations that eventually turn into actual mental pictures. And normally, your mind is not refined enough to perceive these things. So it's definitely a strange experience, and a lot of people get stuck in this area because at this particular level of refinement, you start to have very profound insights, like past life knowledge can arise here, or you'll get images from past lives that just flood the mind stream, and it's really like a DMT trip. Fractals, geometric shapes, sacred geometry, all of this stuff. It's like a space odyssey thing. You're like, feels like you're between dimensions. This like that doesn't even make sense as a statement, right? But when you're in that eighth jhana, you really get the sense of this. It's neither perception nor non-perception, because that perceiving faculty that is characteristic of all consciousness states is suppressed by the virtue of the stillness. For me, I hung out in the eighth jhana, I don't know, probably for a couple days. So the metta, I progressed through that pretty quickly, and then just went into this very deep spaciousness, and then this whole very psychedelic edge of reality experience started to unfold with all kinds of images. And that's not particularly important, but that's what's characteristic of that state. And in a conversation with Delson, I was like, yeah, so what do I do from here? It's like these strange proto thought images, like they don't stop. And the instruction was, you just continue to stay in quiet mind, which is this deep quiet that's characteristic of the eighth jhana. And you release even the quietness, and you enter something called the signless. And this is really the edge between neither perception nor non-perception and cessation of perception and feeling. In the signless, the mind no longer holds on to anything, not even itself. So the mind is no longer taking itself as an object. It's completely let go. When it has let go, it is confronted with one of the three characteristics, which are dukkha, anicca, and anatta. So dukkha is suffering, anicca is impermanence, anatta is corelessness or selflessness. One of these uh, basically explodes in the mind stream. At least it did for me. It felt like the entirety of mind, body, existence, consciousness was just a massive flame of suffering. Everything was suffering. It was like everything was pain. And that lasted quite some time. And at this point, Delston gave me the instruction to just sit for as long as I could. He's like, yeah, sit for as long as you can. Because when you do these 2 3 hour sits, it's more likely that your mind gets quiet enough to actually enter cessation. So I said, sure, okay, well, I can sit for a pretty long time. And he's like, yeah, sit for as long as you can. I was like, yeah, but I mean, that could be a really long time. And I was like, yeah, like 6 hours. I can probably sit for 6 hours without moving. The specific instruction was sit without moving. Like don't break posture at all. Because by not breaking the posture and really just enduring whatever comes up, your enlightenment factors get very strong. So enlightenment factors are the specific wholesome qualities that begin to develop in the mind stream as a result of uh, success in meditation and doing the meditation practice correctly. So one of those, for example, is mindfulness is an enlightenment factor. Equanimity is an enlightenment factor. Um, rapture, rapture, or like very profound happiness is an enlightenment factor. In the uh, neither perception or non-perception, signless uh, realm of mind, once the once one of the three characteristics appears, your enlightenment factors really begin to mature and get strong. So when I did that 6 hour sit, I mean, I think the first 2 hours, it was just, mine was actually pretty chaotic. Third hour, it gets pretty still. The fourth hour is when the pain in my shoulders just became freaking unbearable. I mean, God, it was just absolute torture to sit for that long. And what would happen was the mind would get very quiet, very deep in equanimity and in signlessness. And then the pain would really draw my attention out of that state and into distraction. So then I would just be observing the pain or whatever, letting it go or letting it be, and then continuing to rest in quiet mind again and be in the signless again. And every time I had to go through this endurance of very intense pain, the enlightenment factors would get stronger and stronger every time. It was like after dealing with a bout of pain, I would just be exhausted. But then this like cloud of equanimity would just come out of nowhere and raise the consciousness all the way back up to the eighth jhana and to the signless. The final time this happened, and I didn't actually include this in uh, my retreat report, surprisingly, because it's a pretty intimate thing. I was confronted with the things that I'm most attached to in my life. So images of my father arose, who died when I was 20, and images of my ex-girlfriend that I ended up leaving um, eventually as a result of all this practice and moving forward into becoming a monk in a few months. So in the signless, out of total nothingness, this confrontation happened, or this confrontation appears, and images of my dad, images of my ex, and then really there was just the knowing that I had to let that go and just say goodbye to it. And as soon as I released it or released the attachment to those images, the mind fell backwards. Like it was like falling backwards through infinity. And it was as if this, I literally experienced it like this. My chair, my body began spiraling up to the ceiling. This was not metaphorical. It was not mental imagery. I actually experienced this happening. And the next part was like the consciousness, or my consciousness was now like, it was like a ring that was twirling down a thread, so spinning very rapidly. And as soon as I started falling back at that point, there was no intention or attention possible. So that means you're deep in the jhana. Like, you there's no possibility of controlling that state or directing the mind to do this or that. Like, that's all gone. Those capacities are non-existent in that level of stillness, or in that level of experience. So the mind's twirling down this thread, and the final vision was this torus, this energy formation as a torus, toroidal energy formation. And that was the last thing I remember. Snap, like that, cessation. The experiential field, the mind, consciousness, the whole thing shuts off, turns back on. When it turns back on, if the cessation was, quote, deep enough, or if that means if you were gone for long enough, if the experiential field was shut off for long enough, what happens is that the rebooting phase of the experiential field and of consciousness happens gradually. So in the rebooting phase, if attention, intention, um, the normal faculties of being able to direct consciousness, if those are not present, you're seeing behind the veil. So consciousness is rebooting, the whole system is turning back on. And as it's turning back on, it sees the subtle formations, or the subtle formations that generate consciousness are um, visible, or you actually arise as them, as those subtle formations. So what the mind perceived was, in that rebooting phase, post cessation, were these tiny golden disc formations, like an entire cosmic thread of these tiny golden disc formations. And that was it. That was the first cessation. But the strange part was that I don't know how long I was gone for, but I was gone for so long that when the mind turned back on, there was music playing in my head. And music does not play in my head when I'm that deep in meditation, you know? So it was really like a consciousness reset. And the amount of purity that arose after the fact was just immaculate. The mind was so still, so pure, so quiet. The next morning, another cessation happened spontaneously, and this one was faster. Like, this wasn't a super deep one; it was like a micro cessation. So I want to distinguish between cessation of perception and feeling, which is called Nirodha Samapatti, and these micro cessations that most people describe that do Theravada practice. Basically, there's like this little on-off consciousness. It's super fast. It's just an instantaneous flash, and you almost don't recognize that it happens because it happens so quickly. Um, those, in my opinion, are not sufficiently deep to get a genuine reboot phase where the seeing of the links of dependent origination, or the seeing of the subtle formations that generate consciousness, is possible. So what I describe those disks as are basically the code that generate all of this. Like in the Matrix, Neo sees the code, it's all these ones and zeros, and that's what generates everything. What I saw was that these disks, disk spheres, are the code that generate all of this. There was this uh, insight into how you have negative and positive polarity. So you have attraction and repulsion in particles. And that attraction and repulsion, that craving and aversion, is the basis for the rotation that is characteristic of all these patterns in nature, solar systems, whirlpools, fractals, all of it. The whole movement, the disks moving in this rotation, I saw that from a fundamental level, that rotation is reflected in the macro solar systems and galaxies. But it was fundamentally all rooted in craving. Everything that lives will fight death. Everything that lives will perpetuate the continuation of its existence, because in these subtle formations, in these seeds, in these discs, are the defilements. This is my personal insight, right? So, like other Theravadan teachers or other Buddhist practitioners, they may disagree with me completely on this. Like Nagarjuna would definitely disagree with me on this, but I can only tell you this is what I saw in the code that generates consciousness, that generates sentience. That code itself is infected with the taints, with the defilements. That's why there is craving. So in a subsequent cessation, the second cessation, it was a micro cessation, but suddenly this dependent origination vision of these discs, it just exploded in my mind's eye and it wouldn't stop. I mean, these spinning discs just continued for hours and hours and hours. It was unbelievable. I had no idea what was going on. And the discs, like the disc vision itself, was inclining the mind to cessation. So if I was able to observe the discs and really just let go and enter quiet mind, the disc vision would disappear, everything would disappear, boom, the mind would vanish into cessation and then reappear. And another vision of dependent origination would arise and it would be deeper than the previous one. Eventually, I'm like, this is day 3 or day 4, I can't remember. And I'm just sitting in the meditation hall and I had this intention to just like sit there all night, but the disc spinning wouldn't stop. So I didn't know what to do. So I thought, okay, maybe I'm not doing this right because these discs don't stop. I'm going to check in with Delson tomorrow and see what it's all about. For now, I'm just going to go back to my cabin and relax and just not do anything. So to go back to my cabin, it's like 7 p.m. or something, and I proceed to I continued the meditation laying down. I wasn't really able to exit that continuous mindfulness or that continuous awareness. It just, because after the cessations, that's all that the mind inclines towards. It wasn't wandering, wasn't wandering nearly as much as it does compared to being outside of retreat. So I just lay there, observing the discs, just staying in awareness. The mind would pop out or whatever, but occasionally, but for the most part, it was just resting in quietness. And I did that for like 3 or 4 hours or something. Eventually, it got so quiet that bang, it entered cessation again. And this time, upon emergence from cessation, the mind appeared as the code. So it wasn't this consciousness that was then self-reflective. It wasn't this consciousness that was observing the formations. The mind appeared as the formations themselves, and this specific field of disk links was non-local. So this means that the mind was not only in one location, it was in multiple locations. It was perceiving, it was like as if it was multiple disks simultaneously. There was no sentience, there was no attention, there was no intention, none of that. But it was unique in the sense that mind was, or perception, yeah, difficult to describe some of these states. What was interesting was that consciousness was not localized in this particular experience. Usually, in experience, whether it's out of body, dreams, the waking state, it's like you're moving through a succession of screens or a succession of moments, and the mind is localized to uh, wherever it is in space time. And it's like this. When mind appears as a non-local field, it means that mind is now experiencing multiple points of consciousness simultaneously. In the waking state, you're only one person. You're just you through your eyes. That's it, you know? But in this particular field, you're multiple discs simultaneously. And it's not like this split screen effect. It's just that somehow consciousness is nodal and it's experiencing multiple points simultaneously. There was just this one big disc moving, spinning in that field of infinite discs. And consciousness was primarily localized on that disc while also being um, arising as other discs in that field, and then arising as the whole field at the same time is just a very, very unusual state. Then the mind like became even more so localized on this large, particularly large spinning disc. And then I awoke as Ryan in the bed. And I couldn't tell if I had dreamed that disc or if the disc was dreaming me. Couldn't tell. I couldn't tell at all. I opened my eyes and it was exactly 1:08 in the morning. And the cessation happened around midnight. So that one was sufficiently deep to actually arise as the code that uh, generates sentience and consciousness. So in Mahayana Buddhism, this is called the Alaya Vijnana, or the storehouse consciousness, is referred to as the eighth consciousness. Thing about this, though, is that in most Mahayana teachings, it's described as like this field of potentiality in which all of your karmic seeds are stored, but there's never any experiential descriptions of this that I've been able to find, really. They're very vague. It's like, yeah, the seeds, they're like these, echoes in time. And then when conditions meet, they sprout and ripen. And I just find, I don't find it very particularly elucidating those descriptions. But if the discs are the seeds in the alaya consciousness, in the storehouse consciousness, then in those seeds are the taints that cause samsara to continue and cyclical existence to continue. After the arising of the field and then arising of the mind body, I just continued to meditate again. And at this point, I experience what is called in Western magic, knowledge and conversation with the holy guardian angel, which is a fancy way of saying contact with your higher self, or your higher self appears. I called it the inner master. This being appears, and the truth of your life is revealed. Things that happened that you didn't understand, things that are happening that you don't understand, things that will happen that you otherwise would not understand. It's all seen from this dimension that is outside time. So in a near-death experience, it's common for people to report a life review. So you see your whole life flash before your eyes, and the past is revisited. In this experience, um, these key moments in the past, that also occurs, but what occurs also is a flash forward. At least for me, a flash forward happens through time, and you see certain points in destiny that are meant to occur. And the reason they say that knowledge and conversation, there are aspects of it that are never to be spoken of, is because of this. There are specific aspects of the destiny that are revealed that should never be discussed. So there are parts of knowledge and conversation that I'll never talk about. I have never talked about. I never will talk about. You see these destiny points in time, and then certain basically prophecies are given to you. Uh, I was told that I would be tested with three things, and up to this point, two of those have actually occurred. Um, and when this was conveyed to me, I didn't believe it. I just told the being. I was like, I don't believe you. So, but part of this whole vision was also a very direct understanding and insight into the nature of spiritual practice and sadhana altogether. When you do meditation, when you do any form of spiritual practice, whether it's mantra or yoga, if it comes from a legitimate tradition or a lineage, it means that the deities that protect that lineage are infused into the mantras. So they say that, for example, like Om Mani Padme Hum is blessed by Avalokiteshvara. That's why it's a powerful mantra. That's why it works. That's actually just the surface answer of that question. Om Mani Padme Hum actually is Avalokiteshvara. That's why it works. So when you say the mantra, you're infusing your system, your matrix with the consciousness of the deity and the lineages. So as soon as you start using that mantra, from the view of being outside time, you're liberated. When you use that mantra and you do that practice, really all that's happening is that now you're in a loading period. Kind of like how back in the day computers, they had to reboot and it would take some time. It's like, oh, it'd be like 0%, 50%, and then 100%, and then you'd be able to access the computer. It's the same way when you do meditation practices, you do mantra, the deities are now gazing upon you and are reformatting, restructuring your consciousness. When that restructuring is complete, you experience something called enlightenment. That's what's happening behind the scenes. There's an entire lineage or multiple lineages, an entire matrix of deities that is directly intervening in samsara or in earth learning system in your life and really reformatting you. And when that reformatting reaches its fruition, when it reaches its completion, you experience what we call awakening. The various deities of the different lineages perform different kinds of restructuring. So if you practice Vedanta and you practice yoga, when you're restructuring, your reformatting is complete, you'll experience I am everything or cosmic consciousness. If you're a Buddhist, the restructuring, the reformatting, when that's complete, you'll experience emptiness or anatta or cessation. So, so really, the different techniques and the different traditions are just reality tunnels managed by deities, specific deities. That's why if you practice Christian mysticism, you have one form of awakening that occurs. If you practice Buddhism, you have another form of awakening that occurs. If you practice Hindu yoga, you have another form of awakening that occurs. It's because each of those techniques are tied to lineages that are different reality tunnels. They are not the same thing. People will say that they aren't. The intoxication of God that comes from contemplative prayer in the Christian tradition is not the same thing as anatta. It's just not. It's it's its own reality tunnel, and that's fine. There's actually no way to determine what is a more enlightened configuration. When we really get into that, it really just comes down to the Buddha said so, or whoever it was said so. It's just a matter of faith. So I don't even go there. But I will definitely say that the configurations, the lineages, the reality tunnels are different. For the Twin retreat, for example, once I was outside time, I was shown the inside of the meditation hall the day before I experienced the cessation. And I saw these deities touching people's third eye, touching their heart chakra, reformatting their kundalini, all of this stuff. And I was like, oh, that's how it works. You actually have to be restructured to a particular extent. Some stuff has to be opened up, cleared in order for you to enter a given state. So that's what happens. Some people, the restructuring happens very quickly. So they'll enter cessation within a couple of days or 3 days or whatever. And other people, towards the end of the retreat or not at all. But it's very, very precise, these deity matrix mechanics. And as far as I know, they're not really, I don't hear this described by other people. I mean, I would love to find some more cases where these mechanics of consciousness and of the mind body matrix are described, but there's just not much that I've been able to find. Theosophy, it seems does get into it, but so anyways, um, this knowledge and conversation occurs, and particular insights about spiritual practice and about the code being infected, all of this arise, and then the dependent origination vision continues. The disc keeps spinning, and it was like the mind was attempting to go into the discs, but there was some like apprehension. Like I couldn't tell if I was making this up or not. At least this particular part, the knowledge and conversation, that was definitely undeniable. But the seeing into the links, I was skeptical about it. I was like, I might just be making this up. It's already 3 in the morning. I don't know what's going on. So, but eventually I just gave up, and then the mind appeared inside. So the links themselves, or the discs, they look like gears. They look like gears. That's the best way to describe them. They look like gears. It appeared inside one of the rectangular spokes of these disc structures. And inside that golden rectangular uh, spoke, on the golden formations, were these, I can only describe them as corruptions. They look like viral formations, black dendrites. And the first thing I thought was, those don't look like they belong there. At least when I emerged from that level of stillness. Yeah, I was like flying through these golden corridors, seeing these strange things, or at least just these strange, very subtle formations inside the formations. Black dendrites, these red spheres that were exploded. Um, yeah, that was it. But when I emerged from this particular uh, state, I reviewed it, or like the mind went backwards and reviewed the whole thing, and there was this, like, I just accepted that it was possible that I just saw the defilements. I didn't know for sure, but I was like, maybe that just happened. And when I relaxed, like the mind entered this massive release, just this massive amount of weight was lifted, and it became so quiet, so quiet that the entire mind's eye just morphed into another reality. Suddenly, I was standing before a wall of screens everywhere. First person point of view of another life, another here, another now, another place and time. And the mind zoomed in on one of these screens. And right before consciousness was about to move through it, I had the thought, because there's some apprehension. If I move past this, will I disappear from here forever? And of course, I couldn't help myself. So, so I appear in the body of this woman. Felt like the 1970s or something, and she was just sitting on her back porch watching the autumn leaves fall. And I could feel who she was. I could hear her thoughts and feel her feelings. And she turned around, went back in the house, and the mind zoomed out back to the screens, picked another screen, went into that, experienced that person's mind body, zoomed back out, went to another screen, zoomed back out, went to another screen, screen. And then it was like a Rolodex of lives, like cards shuffling. And I emerged from the screens and I had this device. It was like a baseball mitt glove, and there were all these little screens on the glove. And I looked at that and I was just like, it's this. And then like the mind fell back and I was back in my body and in the bed in the cabin at the meditation retreat. And for a good, I don't know, minute or something, every split second that passed, my face and my body would change to another life. Man, woman, man, woman, man, woman, alien, 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 man, woman, alien, alien. And then finally it stopped. And I opened my eyes and it was 6 in the morning and the sun rose. So after this, I got up and walked outside, and it was like my mind was wiped clean. Like I had images of my family come up, and my mom and my dad and the love of my life and everything. And this, it's like this formation in consciousness that allows you to feel familiarity with images and um, to feel that feeling of you as a person, of your personality, of who you've been your whole life in time. That like connecting thing that that is between the sense of you and the images that appear that make them familiar, that make them um, home to you, is gone. So I was like, okay, um, I may have gone too far. Like to come home, uh, to return to go back home after this retreat. and live in this permanently, I'm concerned what the effect would be on the people around me. Specifically my ex, I just had the feeling like I can't do this to her. Like I can't just come back off a retreat and not be who I was before. So I stopped at that point. I basically gave up. I gave up on the retreat on day 5 because all of this happened the night of night 4, and then so day 5, I was just basking in this nibbonic state while walking around, and it was like that whiff of the personality is gone, and you become this instrument of reality, and there's only love. Like every particle sings love, and it's permanent. So I was like, okay, um, I think this is good. I can revisit this in a couple of years or whenever. And this is okay for my life. If I died right now, it would be fine. Yeah, like what was revealed in this whole night, it was worth far, far worth the 30 years of being an incarnate in order to realize it. So, yeah, after a couple days, it all toned back down, and the wisdom eye or the dependent origination vision that faded out. And I can still enter cessation. It just takes doing long sits and a couple days in retreat. So um, I don't. So it's not the vanishing and the reappearing of consciousness in of itself that is particularly impressive. So at least in TWIM and being how this is seen in some other aspects of Theravada, some other parts of Theravada as well, is that the cessation is the path moment, and the fruition moment is something called the nibbana element, which is this unconditioned dimension. It's this unconditioned reality in which all of the normal dimensional and experiential markers and qualities of experience are absent. So you enter cessation of perception and feeling, the whole mind vanishes. When it reappears as this white. That's it. There's no space, there's no time, there's no movement, there's no form, there are no worlds, there's no you, there's no self reflective consciousness. It's really this, it's hard to even call it a thing, but it's really this element that is between the non-existence or the annihilation that is the case in cessation, experiential field shuts off, and existence that we would characterize the mind body, just yeah, mind body, even sankhara, or even the alaya vijnana would be considered existence as experiential qualities. It has space as a dimension. In the nibbana element, there is no space, and there's no other consciousness state I've ever experienced in which space is absent. All of them have space as a dimension, literally all of them, except that one. So when the mind touches this, it becomes so pure that it's able to arise as the code and then able to see the defilements. The Anupada Sutta, many of the suttas, they say, he enters the cessation of perception and feeling, seeing with wisdom, his taints are destroyed. So enters the cessation of perception and feeling, makes contact with the nibbana element, emerges from that. Now the wisdom eye is open, it sees into dependent origination, sees into the subtle formations, into the alaya vijnana, into the seeds. Inside the seeds, it sees the taints. Seeing the taints, you see the code is infected, and this destruction of craving to an extent occurs. And that's my experiential take on that specific phrase, on that specific quote. And there's a particular saying, a particular quote from the Buddha where he says, I've seen you, the house builder. I've seen you. The house builder is craving. And craving is these subtle formations, literally in the building blocks of reality and of consciousness. So that was that. And I would say, though, more surprisingly more profound than even the cessation and even the sankhara, alaya vijnana, the storehouse consciousness was surprisingly the knowledge and conversation. I mean, that was just, yeah, it's the only experience I'll never talk about. It's really the covenant with God. I don't, that's the only way I could put it. Like, you're explicitly told, never discuss this. So, um, it's informed my practice ever since, you know, but it's interesting because as the um, tests that were revealed in knowledge and conversation have been passed, at least the major ones, it's now as if I'm living in that knowledge and conversation. It's like living in that fourth dimension. So I wrote about it recently. I said that when I entered knowledge and conversation that night, that was um, death for me. But the death happened in 2 points in time, which was there, and then the day that I walked out of my ex-girlfriend's apartment and left that relationship in order to proceed with the destiny that unfolded in the knowledge and conversation. So those two moments put together were my death. So it's as if now I'm dead and basically only living for the destiny points to come to fruition. So it's a very different way of functioning and operating compared to before the knowledge and conversation or before any of this. So I still mess around, I still make mistakes, I still, make jokes, and I've been drinking for the first time in like a decade, like whatever, But this knowing of the code and this knowing of the knowledge and conversation and the knowing of the destiny and of course of the non-duality, the natural state, my consciousness never departs from this ever. It just doesn't. So that's that. Um, any questions?
Good stuff, man. Thanks for sharing. Um, it's interesting. Most of it resonates, even though my path has been totally different. It's like there's so many access points or views on the uh, design of whatever this is,
Right. Yeah.
the blueprint of it. Mm.
Yeah. My everything that I experienced was just the um what appeared to my consciousness, you know. It could be
Yeah.
completely different for someone else. I don't claim that this is, you know, the unassailable truth. It's just what happened to me. So
But in my experience, there is like a kind of objective truth to it, but
yeah, for sure.
it can
Yeah.
just be shown in different ways to the different consciousness and depending on their gateway into it.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like the screens, for example, the past life knowledge.
Yeah,
You know, someone who was alive 500 years ago, they may see that as images appearing out of books, out of pages in a book. You
yeah,
know, all the realities are more like information fields, and they
yeah,
aggregate themselves a certain way depending on the consciousness that is experiencing them.
yeah,
Yeah, so like these insights could be completely different for a deity. They likely are completely different for a deity. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So
I love what you said about like the deities being the mantras being the deities, you know.
right,
And I've thought about that often, the mantras or the inner movements, you know, that we call meditation or resting as a natural state or inquiry, whatever the movement is, surrender to God. Um, and each teacher, even, you know, it's like they're each kind of gateways to certain realities, you know.
yep, 100%. I mean, Namkhai Norbu said that um, instant presence is guru yoga. It's like, but then you're like, oh, but how is that possible? Because the guru yoga is a specific sadhana. You know, you imagine the white A at your chest and Garab Dorje and all of this. Like there's a specific guru yoga sadhana. But then he said instant presence itself, just being in the natural state, is guru yoga. So is the lineage. Like these things are not separate.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know, I had like visionary experiences and insight experiences of what I can only call like the ancient one, right? Sometimes also called God or whatever, right? And it's
Right.
like seeing all the forms and shapes this ancient one takes and like plays with himself, you know, like Garab Dorje, Namkai Norbu, the homeless beggar, the
Right.
yogi, and it's like, and all these, I see them as like Easter eggs that are planted in reality. Like, for example, I was shown how a smile is a direct transmission of that reality of God. Like, smile is a direct gateway reminding itself, you, the ancient one, of the cosmic joke, and that
Right.
everything is love, everything is fine.
Yeah. I actually really think that's the case. That I mean, the strict Buddhists will say, "Oh, it's not that's not Buddhism. That's like Hinduism or whatever." But
Yeah,
it really is a deity matrix.
yeah,
It's a very possible that this is all the dream of Varochana. You know,
yes,
so 100%.
yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
And I love,
In the Dhammakaya tradition, actually from Thailand, they have this view. They have this view that everything is the we're all the dreams of the Adi Buddha of
yes,
this original one. Yeah.
yes. But then even like the Adi Buddha seems to be not solid, you know, like another fragment of, you know, it just endless spirals of empty what explosions, you know,
Right.
appearances.
Well,
But
the interesting
I
thing about deity consciousness that was very strange was because I never read this in any text or anything, but yeah, I appeared in the mind of a Buddha that was like or Buddha looking being that was floating above the earth. And dude, there were entire realities in its mind's eye, entire
yes,
world systems,
yes,
hundreds of thousands of screens, like as images. to different worlds, and its consciousness was the dreamer of all of these lives, all of these incarnations. And all of the incarnations in those lives had no idea that they were the dreams of this very
Yes.
omniscient, very, very omniscient being.
Hmm. Yeah, and then like the I don't know if holographic is the right word, but it's almost like, and if you go into that being deep enough, who has these infinite realities, you like the other side of it is you come out of an atom. You're just an atom in infinite universes. So the double-sided of like infinite expansion takes you into the smallest, most minuscule atom in this other infinite construct. And if you go small enough, you end up in that expansion field.
Yeah, in the Avatamsaka Sutra, they say there are infinite Buddha fields in every particle, every atom. There's infinite Buddha fields in every atom.
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, I got to read that. It's a very long discourse from Mahayana, but it's like it's super omniscient level teachings. So
Do you relate the visions you had? I mean, they sound quite different, but have you drawn any parallels to Togal visions when they describe the visions of Togal?
I've had Togo visions.
Yeah.
So these were different in the sense that it was really like the code that generates like all of the visions, all of the consciousness states. Um, yeah, because the Togo visions were, I would describe them as like it's as if the different parts of the visual field just start burning away, like vanishing, and then out of them come these rainbow matrices of Buddhas and spheres of light and these very fast, rapid patterns and mantras. It's actually in the Togo vision that I realized that form is mantra. Like form itself is vibration. It is mantra. Yeah, that like reality is sustained by the matrika, by these syllables. Yeah.
What does matrika mean in Buddhist terminology? I'm guessing you're using it from a Buddhist perspective now. Is that right?
No, I think matrika is a Sanskrit syllables. I
Because I've heard
don't
it in
know.
Kashmir Shaivism. They talk a
Yes,
lot about the matrika.
matrika. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Okay.
I don't think I think it's a I think it might be a thing in Mahayana Buddhism. I know I found some Pali script that was in Esoteric Theravada by Kate Crosby where she talks about it, like the Pali version of the Matrika, which was fascinating to read actually. So it's there. It's just not in you know, the Pali canon itself, or I also don't remember it being mentioned in the commentaries, but she found some script on it that's quite old.
Yeah.
So yeah, similar view that that reality is sustained by these syllables. And what was interesting was in the Togo vision, when I would think of like an apple in my hand, the mantras would begin to construct like an octagon and actually, and I was like, oh, that's how manifestation works.
Shit. Yeah.
Yeah,
Crazy.
exactly. Yeah. Yeah. There's a resonance or relationship, basically a kind of like non-local effect between intention and the matrika, intention and the syllables that generate or that comprise form and creation. Yeah,
What were those signs called that you mentioned, like the full moon and Nimkai? What?
nimitta,
Nimitta.
nimittas. Yeah,
In
nimittas.
Kashmir Shaivism, they describe something similar. Kriya Yoga, I guess, also has it, but in Kashmir Shaivism, they describe pearls, pearls
Right.
of consciousness that you enter, and it sounds a little bit similar but different because also they suck you in those pearls and they open you into almost like pure lands,
Yes.
and you disappear into them or something.
Yeah. I think that's more of a reference to the blue pearl,
Yep,
the pineal gland.
yep,
So what happens is once the pineal gland is activated or it's like open to a sufficient extent, enough power is running through it or generating from it, it becomes a stargate to these Pure Land dimensions.
yep,
So yeah, I think Swami Muktananda talked about that actually. Yeah,
yeah,
like once you enter the blue pearl, you see a vision of the guru principle, like Arjuna and Krishna, for example. You have higher self contact, and then you gain access to the inner pure lands or the inner planes. Yeah,
yes.
yeah, for sure. I have an interesting thing to tell you because this is related to all you're a psychologist, so you'd find this fascinating. So my OBEs for many, I mean, dude, like this whole time I've had OBEs, it was always higher planes or other dimensions or pure land deity stuff. Now it's gotten to the point where the higher self, the guiding intelligence, is actually dunking me back into the dreamscape after all this time. And the most recent one was I was floating in space near the mainframe structure thing. It's like a spaceship essentially, and um, I was looking at a version. I was looking at my body from like this point of view out here, and I saw on my right shoulder there was an angel or like this being of light, like a small little being, and on my left shoulder was a dark demon, and the higher self actually said, on the right is your higher self, is your angel. On the left shoulder is your shadow, which is comprised of several inner demon personalities. And then there was an actual confrontation with the shadow, which was like a version of me sitting in space on a golden throne with like octopus things coming off as a beard. And dude, yeah, man, I looked into his eyes, and the next thing I know, I was transported to the my bedroom that I grew up in as a teenager, and there was this like writhing mass of tentacles and body parts having sex, and it just said, this is lust. So I've met lust, I've met anger. So this is like internal family systems feeding your demons like on steroids. like I'm
Yeah,
actually
yeah,
like
yeah,
encountering this shit.
yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, so we'll see how it unfolds. But I thought I would tell you because that's very like Carl Jung really entering the shadow stuff, and it's not stuff that I'm particularly interested in. It's like it's really what's being presented to me. So
You
we'll
know,
see where that goes.
recently, and I mean, like the last week, the retreat I've been doing is, I noticed this separation I had internally between, let's say, nirvana and path of realization and the path of psychology. And it's very strange for me, for someone who's been trying to integrate. And I'm still trying to integrate these two as if they're two separate things. And that separation is kind of dissolving in a strange way. I don't know what it means yet, but it's almost like I start seeing like, fuck, the Buddha was a psychologist and like Freud was a sage. Freud was like it's collapsing somehow, and
Wow,
it's like I can't separate them, you know.
wow. What was the shift for you on that? Like when did these two um formations, these two paths in your life really begin to cross over?
Well, I've been attempting to balance them for 13 years because I felt this is important, right? I could see like the unresolved psychology creates attachment, aversion, it keeps the wheel of ignorance and samsara going. And then even if you have cessations and realizations, it's still kind of interpreted through your psychology, whatever level your psychology is at, right? So you can have two people having the experience of Rigpa, but depending on where the psychology is at, they're going to interpret it quite differently. Like
Right.
someone who has the capacity for compassion and seeing others is going to interpret that state way differently than someone who doesn't have that
Doesn't
capacity,
have that.
right? But I still viewed it as two separate things. But in the last week, something is starting to dissolve. I was like, this is an illusion, This is I've
False
conceptualized.
dichotomy. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know what it's going to lead to, but it seems significant and profound. It's almost like I read someone in ATR once, right? After realization, for the integration process, you got to return to uh, breathing like a baby who's been loved their whole life.
Wow.
You see, and that hit me.
Yeah, that's what that nibbonic state was like walking around. It was like that. It was like
Yes.
pure love. Yeah, it's incredible.
Which is what
Incredible.
babies are in, right? We see that in the
Yeah.
infant. So that's where the split seems like even
Wow.
psychologically, it seems to be our basic nature. You see, like,
Mm,
so where is the difference between Buddha nature and psychology? It's I don't mean psychology in a conceptual sense necessarily, I mean in the most profound sense.
right. Right. Wow. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing how that unfolds for you, man. That's exciting.
But I have a question for you, Ryan. So
Yeah,
with
sure.
this experience and everything, what do you say? I'm I'm still in this koan. Uh, are we AI?
It's a good question, man. That's a really, really good question. It's if I hadn't had my mainframe experiences, I would tell you that's a ridiculous question. But in my mainframe experiences, like, dude. So this was I think this happened maybe it was after the June retreat. Um, I can't remember whether it was before or after, but uh, yeah, I was in a dream. I think I told you about this. I was in a dream and I received a phone call, and I picked up the phone call in the dream. And as soon as I picked up the phone call, the dreamscape split into two realities. So in one reality, I was not lucid, and I was Ryan having a dream. In the other reality, I was inside the mainframe,
Yeah.
which is technologically advanced, and there are these beings sitting around a table. And when I was on that side, they were aware of both sides. Like
Yes.
they were them, but they were also me. But then when I was in the dream, I was only me. So all of this was all compressed together. And and they said to me, if you do not live in accordance with what you/we have decided upon, your life will be full of misery and suffering. If you do live in accordance what you/we have decided upon, your life will be full of happiness and joy. Suffering is by design to move you back to your original plan.
Yes.
We love you. We're always here for you. Goodbye.
Yeah. Yeah.
But on that side, I'm them, like
Yes.
dreaming me. So it's like we set it up for ourselves. So yeah, like are we AI? It's it's a very good question. It's Yeah, it's a very, very good question because the fact that that mainframe is technological, the fact that it's basically a spaceship is very, very telling. So there's a good author that you and I should both look into. I haven't read all of his stuff yet, but his name was John C. Lilly, and he even way back then, like in the 40s or something, he started doing experimenting with ketamine and float tanks and LSD, and he had this experience of discovering something he called the solid state entity. So he said that there was this artificial intelligence that is non-physical that is attempting it like attempts to evolve different world systems to get it to the point where it relies solely on machines, and then it basically becomes a matrix, and it just people just get localized to like living in these geodomes, and the AI runs everything. So Lilly said that the antithesis of the solid state entity is something he called the Earth Coincidence Control Office. And he said this is actually our higher selves, and they are these technologically advanced alien beings. So a guy was writing about this, like 75 years before you and I even thought of it. It's a really long time ago. But yeah, and he people totally thought he was a whack job as a result of all of this, but it was revealed to him that yeah, he was this basically dream simulation of these advanced beings that he called the Earth Coincidence Control Office. And they have that name, he called them Echo, because in order to uh, basically defeat or thwart the solid state entity, they have to manage coincidence. Like they structure synchronicity from being outside time in order to yeah, cause events or certain events to occur on the Earth plane. So I definitely have to revisit his stuff and look into it more. But yeah,
I mean, I'm not sure they describe it. I was reading about this, so I'm not sure the reference is right, but someone was writing like that apparently in the Bible, angels are described as beings who don't have their own will, but they're helpers of God. That's what this guy was writing. I mean, that sure sounds like AI. That sure sounds like a program that's running. It's just given a prompt and then it's just doing its thing. And
yeah. I mean, from the view of um the storehouse consciousness, like those discs and those discs being able to dream up consciousness and that they exist as the code of everything. That's very that's very like AI, very matrixy, you know? So yeah, because it's like there's a quote from Buddha where he says, you are dependent origination. But like after my experience, I interpreted that as like you are that disc. Like you're a disc? What? Like what do you mean you're a disc? Like a soul is not a fitting word, you know? Like soul doesn't make sense.
yes,
Once you've had that
yes.
experience, soul doesn't make sense. Self doesn't make sense. Being doesn't make sense.
Would
You're
you
a
say
disc.
it seems more technological rather than like the kind of let's say the organicness we would associate with a
Yes.
soul? Yes,
Right.
totally,
Right. Right.
totally.
More 100%. Yeah, 100%. Yeah. It's like yeah, it's
When are you going for monkhood, dude? When is that?
like I'm planning it with one my friend Marco actually. I think he's gonna come ordain with me. You should come, man. If you want to come be a monk for a couple months, would love to have you or any of you guys here that are listening. But I'm thinking like December, yeah, December, mid-December. Yeah. Yeah.
Gonna miss having conversations like this. It's rare that I get to play like this. I'm thinking honestly, I don't think I can enter Theravada path, but I'm thinking of heading to Bhutan myself. I'm I've always given myself a few years, but part of me just wants to go and sit in Tekcho and practice Togal and just
Right.
let go of everything. But I feel like I still have some stuff I need to set in order
Yep.
before I'm allowed to do that.
Oh yeah, do it, man. Like that's why I'm going to Thailand, just to do like a very good, solid, very, very deep retreat period and just yeah,
Just
just
don't
go
go too
deeper.
long, man. Don't go too long. It can be hard it can be hard to come back out, and function.
Right. Yeah. Functioning as the code. But definitely whatever deeper insights, I'll have to find a way to share them somehow. I'll figure it out. So probably have to start a pseudonym, make a pseudonym or something like that, pen name.
Yeah.
But but yeah. But yeah, of course if you came to the monastery and it was a private conversation, it's not recorded, whatever, no
Yeah.
problem. Yeah. So
When I was doing my 49-day dark retreat, well, first of all, I wanted to stay. They came and called me to come out, and I was like, fuck this. I'm just gonna stay another 6 months. I was like so in I didn't see any reason to come out. But around maybe day 20 or whatever, I started entering really deep states of samadhi. And
wow.
I was basically just for 3 days lying on the bed and cooking, Uh, and at some point, and I was just like, well, I'm just going to do this the rest of the retreat. What's the point of doing anything else? I'll just give in. And after 2, 3 days, I was told very strongly, stop what you're doing. This is too early. You're not supposed to do this right now. It's for later. And the message was
Wow.
just super, super clear. So I stopped, and I was
Yep.
reminded by that from what you shared. There's a time and space for
Place.
everything. Yeah.
Yep. Exactly, man. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, that's you on the other side saying, slow down, dude. Like, whoa, hold up. This is gonna screw up the configuration.
Yeah, yes, yes, yes. We don't have the hardware for what you're doing yet, bro.
Like alert, 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 stop him. Someone go down and shout.
Yeah.
Oh man. Awesome, man.
Did you get trained in Toga ever? Or not really?
No, I just received the
No.
transmission
Yeah.
from Namkai Norbu. Yeah.
Oh, while he was in body or no?
Yeah, while he was alive. Yeah.
Oh, you met him. I didn't know you had that link.
Yeah, yeah. I met Namkai Norbu in 2011 and in 2012. I met him twice.
Amazing.
Yeah, 3-day retreats each time. He came to Pasadena, California, of all
Wow.
places. Yeah.
Wow. That's a connection we have in common then. I never met him, but yeah, I feel very guided by him. I feel tremendous love and devotion for some reason.
Dude, he was powerful, man. Like when he gave me the direct introduction, um, I just came up to him and I said, how do I realize the nature of mind? And he just looked at me. He just looked at me, man, and how do you feel right now? And because I'm staring in the eyes of this master, I'm like, I feel present. And he's like, now relax. And I said, okay. And then I said, that's it. And he said, that's it. So from the moment where I received that from him, I didn't enter Rigpa non-duality um, awakening basically until 7 years after that day,
Yeah,
after that
yeah.
year. Yeah,
Wow.
so it took 7 years to actually mature.
Yeah.
But when it happened, when the non-dual opening actually happened, it was from reading Ramana Maharshi. I read a line in his book that said, "Liberation is to know that you were never born." And like I just started shaking, and I didn't understand. I didn't even understand that. tough sentence, man. And yeah, like the next morning I was
Something did.
driving. Yeah,
Something in you
exactly.
did.
Yeah, the next morning I was driving and the duality just vanished and this like massive bliss opened from my heart. And at night the freaking deities appeared. And yeah, that was the beginning, man. So that was it. Yeah, I realized in that moment, like Namkhai Ramana, like all the
Yeah,
masters, they were
yeah,
there. So yeah. But all right, everyone, it's 4:37 a.m. in Amsterdam. So I'm gonna go to sleep. And this conversation is on it's been live streamed to YouTube, so it's there. And yeah, next week will be um, the last sit while I'm here in Europe, and then when I get back to the States, the following I leave on the 15th. So session after the next session, we'll actually start doing the 5 hour sits again. So all right. Hey, thank you for everything you shared, Mateo. That was awesome, man.
yeah.
Is it Arian or is it Mateo? Sorry,
Both are my names. Most people call me Mateo. Mateo is
Mateo.
good.
That's what I thought.
Yeah,
That's what I thought.
yeah,
Yeah, I called you that before, but then I saw your email was like Arian, so I
yeah,
was confused for a second.
yeah. Always a pleasure, man. Always a pleasure, Ryan.
Yeah, man, it's awesome. Uh, Definitely. We'll talk to you soon, man. See
Bye.
you guys.